you want to have some characters say that, just so you don't have everybody in the world writing the article like, well,
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's
obviously they all wrote that article.
Warning, the following podcast is a spoiler-filled review of the 2019 film Joker, directed by Todd Phillips and starring Joaquin Phoenix. Editor's note. When discussing the creation of the Joker character in the comments, I mentioned Bob Kane and Bill Finger, but I do not mention Jerry Robinson, and that is an omission on my part that I should not have made. So I just want to, at this point, mention Jerry Robinson, and he should absolutely be credited as one of the Joker's creators. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the podcast.
I'll be going. I'll read your words like black hungry birds with every poem. Like a ball spinning low, and my name is Carnival. Sound music in the night seems to scream of light out of chorus.
Hello and welcome to the Vassals of Kingsgrave. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing the 2019 film Joker, directed by Todd Phillips and starring Joaquin Phoenix. My name is Thomas. I'm FTWard on the podcast of Ice and Fire forums, and today I'm joined by...
Hi, I'm Michael, or Mordion on the forums.
Hey, this is Matt, Blue Armor on the forums.
Jock, Jock here on the forums.
I thought we would begin I had imaginary donuts as our lemon cake equivalent, but I thought we would begin maybe just giving if someone else has something better, please nominate it.
Violent revolutions.
I usually like it to be a food, though.
Rich people. Rich people eat.
Eat the rich, yes.
I don't know, 3 imaginary donuts / devoured rich people.
Out of 5, is that correct?
Out of 5, yeah,
Okay.
sorry. It was obviously very well acted. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix did a great job. It didn't tie in. My biggest problem was the fact that, like, it didn't feel like a comic book movie kind of at all, to the extent that it was kind of like, I'm not really sure why it had Joker branding almost. Like, I didn't believe that guy could ever become a comic book villain. Like, and so it was just sort of the disconnect between those two things and, like, sort of my expectations of, you know, a comic book movie or a movie about comic book characters, were disappointed. So that's my sort of middling kind of review.
Yeah, no, I'm going to kind of be a little boring. I think I just settled, like, on a 4, which is what I tend to give, I feel like, a lot of movies that I, you know, kind of enjoyed but wasn't blown away by. You know, it's a weird thing where when this movie was first announced, I was very much against it. Heath Ledger is my Joker. I don't think that performance will ever be topped. It's one of my favorite film performances of all time. And Joaquin Phoenix is very good, especially when it comes to, like, physicality as an actor. Like, his movements are out of this world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I still just like how the overall character of the Joker was written in The Dark Knight, and Ledger's performance, like, you know, matched that as good as it could be. Back to Joaquin Phoenix, like, between like this film, The Master, and kind of a small indie film which I really liked from last year called You Were Never Really Here. Like, the various, like, levels of, like, physicality and like type of like people he portrays in those three movies is such a wide range and just incredible on all fronts. And yeah, it's kind of like, and then going on what Michael said and what I mentioned in the chat earlier in the week, you know, where the movie was kind of doing a couple different things that didn't quite mesh together for me, you know, and one of them was like taking a somewhat serious dive into mental illness like issue and our issues with dealing with that, although it was all like very surface level and just kind of pointing out all these various problems with our system without really, you know, going into detail and kind of trying to find a solution. And then at the end, it then switches over completely to, you know, just a comic book movie that like couldn't exist outside of the realm of Gotham City. And so it just, and those two things just didn't quite mesh for me. But I will say that like once Joaquin Phoenix like puts on the final Joker like outfit at the end of the movie for like the last 30 minutes, and just like the way he moves and like especially that stair scene, like that's I mean that's as Joker as you can be. Like it was very incredible that, you know, and how he was able to kind of put that mask on, and so I give him props for like coming close to even matching Heath Ledger's performance. But overall, I just, you know, wasn't as interested in the story of the film outside of kind of, you know, the last 30 minutes and some other minor things.
Probably the same for 05. I really enjoyed the sort of multiple choice elements and like the lines between tragedy and comedy and the various storylines interweaving. I also really enjoyed the acting and the music, but I think where its main flaws were with a mental health storyline that I think it started to break apart the various budget related stories that I think were due less quality to the other ones. So I don't think it was perfect. It's more 4 or 5 than 5 out of 5.
Yeah, that's the line I forgot when it comes to the Joker, where you know, you prefer his backstory to be multiple choice. And yeah, he's one of those characters that I think works better with holding, like, with not knowing everything about him.
Yeah, and I mean, I mean, I guess it's sort of like a decision I made as opposed to something in the movie, but like relatively early on, I sort of like decided to think of it as like, well, this is a story that like the Joker is right? This is a version, right? Rather than like, this is all absolutely true, right?
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, again, that's not really in the movie. That was just me.
Well, I think
me making my peace with it. I mean, to a degree, yeah.
There's a level of unreliability to it.
Absolutely. But I mean, even just like the whole thing as even just like as a general, like, it could be a total lie from beginning to end as far as I'm concerned. With like the canon or whatever.
I think that's consistent in the film. I think you guys raise a bunch of really good points. Just briefly, I think I would give it something like a 4.1 or something. So I think it's a little bit better than a 4. I don't think it's a 4.5. Just to go back to some of the points you guys raised, Matt said, and I agree completely, when this movie was first announced, I very strongly did not want it to exist, and it still is a curious thing that it does exist, I think. I clearly, Warner Brothers and DC Films, or whoever owns Warner Brothers at this point, are kind of flailing around, I think, for a strategy of what to do with their DC properties. And this film is really a strange thing to exist, and at the end we'll talk about what kind of future there could be for a Joker Part 2 or another Todd Phillips film or something. But the Joker himself is a character that I think is better off without a backstory. So to go in and kind of put this, again, as kind of Michael alluded to, the semi-solid origin film doesn't make a ton of sense. And then, again, as Matt pointed out, the Joker has kind of famously been portrayed on film, and I guess in animation as well, with some pretty iconic performances. People can debate with Jack Nicholson's performance, I think, but at the time it was viewed pretty positively, and I think there's some fun bits to it even to this day, whatever it is, 25 years, 30 years later. Heath Ledger performance, again, tragically his last performance, I think that impacts maybe our perception of it, but really powerful performance, really elevating. I think the Batman Begins is a very good film, but kind of elevating Nolan's place with those 3 Batman movies, I think, greatly. And then even something like Mark Hamill in Batman the Animated Series is a much beloved performance, and kind of ties in a lot of elements to the Joker that is kind of present in a lot of comics and even in some of the films, but is difficult to maybe capture as a supporting character in a 2-hour film. So it's an uphill climb, I think, for Phillips and Phoenix here, but I think they do a very good job. The placing the film in the area that they chose to place it was really interesting. Gives them a lot of material to work with, I think, that they handle very well. So again, I come down to like a 4.1 or something, so I wasn't sure if I'd be the highest, but it turns out I am slightly the highest on the film. And I was hoping maybe someone loved it. It was like a 5, and someone hated it. It was like a 1 or 2, but
I always like to have a 1 or a 2 person. I'll do my best with my 3.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's clear we all may enjoy it a little bit, maybe some of us more than others, but that there are issues that we take away from the film. And I think we've started to address kind of the unreliable narrator aspect of this film a little bit. And maybe we should talk about that a little bit here, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the Joker, again, in the comics does not have a rock-solid origin. Different, again, that's a character that's, how old is 1940 or whatever? So he's got
75
or 80 years of different writers, different artists working on him, created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, as this film shows in the end credits. He came out kind of very, Bob Kane and Bill Finger, and however you want to define their creatorship of the characters, came up with some pretty iconic characters right at the beginning of Batman that are present all the way to the current day, and Joker is one of them. So with Joker, again, never really established who he was or where he came from. Alan Moore and Brian Boland in, I should probably look up the year, in The Killing Joke, I want to say late 89? No, it must have been before that. Must have been before the Batman movie, but I think post 86, before 89, so somewhere in there, came up with The Killing Joke, which is often considered as close to a canon origin as possible, but even that is multiple choice, and that's kind of echoed in Nolan's Dark Knight series, and a little bit here with the stand-up comedian background for the Joker. But let's kind of, anyone have any thoughts on the unreliable narrator and where that would fit in, and how you felt about how the film handled that, and whether you thought that was appropriate or it was kind of a way to get out of some difficult storytelling aspects?
I don't know. I was actually kind of fine with it, where my interpretation of it is, I think they were very clear about kind of which moments in the film were supposed to be hallucinations, like his putting himself in the Robert De Niro talk show at the very, very beginning of the movie, and the quote-unquote relationship with Zazie Beetz' character, I thought was very telegraphed from the start as being all in his head. And so those were kind of like the two main points that the movie made very clear were all delusions, and all the other stuff I kind of take at face value at actually, happening. At least from his, they could be skewed a little bit from his point of view, but, overall they factually take place. And so I'm not really one to try and overly speculate as to, what other things might be more delusions in the movie. Because then I think we're just cheapening the movie too much to do that.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on that. On the one hand, I agree with you, and I think that there's something to the idea that, like, when they show us something like the girlfriend stuff, they show us outright, like, oh, this didn't actually happen, and they make that very clear. And if you fail to do that with other stuff, then it does kind of leave you in a position where it's like, well, then, I mean, I'm sort of obligated almost to take that as factual, right? I mean, like, you've set a precedent of showing me when something didn't happen, and so then if you don't show me that with other things, then you kind of have to take it as factual. On the other hand, just from the chat before the call in the last couple of days, I've become very enamored with the idea of building sort of I can't remember who said choose your own adventure, maybe Jock, I don't remember, and sort of building the movie that I want it to be out of the component pieces.
That is true. This movie kind of does give you a good opportunity of kind of implanting whatever story you want on the Joker, which is very true to how the character was created in the comics, and with the whole multiple choice line, it's just like you can believe whatever you want. But I don't know. I think some of the arguments about kind of whether or not some of the last 30 minutes were actually taking place or not is just because of maybe how ridiculous, it may go beyond the suspension of disbelief. But I think that's just where the setting of Gotham is crucial, where that kind of craziness and madness can come from that fictional place, as we know it and how it's been set up over the years.
I think that's true, and I mean, that's one of, I kind of mentioned it before, but that's definitely like where some of my big dissatisfaction comes from, because that transition seems so sharp that the suspension of disbelief is not there for me, where it's just sort of like, well, what, okay, I guess it's a different world all of a sudden kind of a thing.
Right, exactly, and that's where then it loses kind of.
It's gritty.
I'm trying to think of the word, but no, it loses kind of the strength of basically any argument it might have been trying to make about the mental health system has to be discarded. You lose the credibility of making that argument when then you just introduce such a wild and crazy and clearly fictional place in the last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even past the last 30 minutes, that final scene really undermines, for me, what has been real.
Is the final scene in the hospital, or?
Correct. So the final scene is in the White Room where he's being interviewed, and then he apparently kills his therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, and then it kind of breaks down on the Benny Hill or Scooby-Doo, where he's running through the hallway being chased by an orderly. To me, that almost feels like it happens a decade. I can't prove that by her clothing, I guess, but it feels like that almost happens after the events have taken place, and it's his recollection, and therefore he's recollecting something may or may not be real. But I can't prove. I feel like her clothes are more or less consistent with the early 80s.
But, so it's sort of like, I mean, he did, in fact, was freed by the mob and then did Joker stuff for 10 years and then was in the hospital.
I feel like because he in that scene, when he says, I'm thinking of a joke or whatever, and you wouldn't get it, he envisions Bruce in the alley with his dead parents. So to me, it feels like, why, if this happened immediately after, would he even think of Bruce? Like, he's got more, I feel like he has more gray in his hair at this time, but again,
Okay. No, I mean, I've only seen it once, but that makes sense. Yeah, I don't have like the visual recollection of the scene that you do, but that makes sense, and it makes that last scene more logical, I think.
And it feels like then maybe I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, but again, I don't feel like it works with her clothing if it's like 10 or 15 years after the fact. But it feels like Batman exists when he's seeing Bruce in that alley. I don't know why else it would make sense, but so I feel like then that undermines everything. If this whole thing is a joke that he's seeing in his mind, and he's kind of grafting his origin story onto Batman's origin story in a way, but again, I can't make a great case for that other than that's how I felt when I first saw it, and then when I saw it again, I was like, I'm going to pay attention to all the details I can in this scene, and her clothing doesn't really feel like it's from like 1990 or something. It does feel like it's more from the early 1980s, which, again, I have trouble consistently putting it all together then in the end.
Maybe she just kind of likes to dress retro, you know?
Right, so my kind of interpretation of that final scene is, so it was clearly kind of later on, I assumed he, after all of these events, he had, been caught and put in the hospital. However, I did not, I do not see it as him just the whole movie is him just telling this story. It's just one of those things where I refuse to see it that way, because if I do see it that way, then what was the fucking point?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. Was the fucking point the question? The film does raise serious issues like mental health. I think like deinstitutionalization that took place. I don't know if it took place all over the Western world, but certainly in the United States, where people who had previously been institutionalized for mental illness were released into the public, and like a pharmacological solution, as well as like we see in this film, kind of like meeting with a social worker and getting a prescription, became how this nation decided to deal with mental illness in the late 60s and the 70s. And the result of that was people on the streets or living various places, halfway houses or with relatives or whatever, were kind of flooded the criminal justice system, which is not really designed in the penal system to handle mental illness. And that's kind of how the United States in the 80s, certainly, and continuing, has decided to deal with the mental illness. And the film is certainly aware of these things and kind of raises these issues, but it never, I don't think, espouses a position or a solution, and nor maybe should it. But then when it becomes maybe a zanier comic book movie in the end, it does kind of feel unfair that it's kind of dealt with this person who has clearly a history of abuse and mental illness and physical results of abuse, and is kind of unable to cope, and we're kind of with him in his head, and I find him to be a sympathetic character up to a certain point of the film. But I think a lot of people have an issue with how the film handles mental illness and how it makes Arthur, at least if not the Joker, a somewhat sympathetic character. Anything you guys would like to say on those points? Or
yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm not sure. I don't have very organized thoughts about it at the moment. I guess I mean, it is such a. I mean, again, it's my central problem with the movie that it is sort of, realistic and also comic book at the same time, and you never know, or I never know on which, sort of playing field to judge any particular thing. Like, obviously, the Joker's crazy, right? With, quotation crazy. And that means something, like, he's fictionally crazy in a way that, like, people have, used narratively for a long time, and that often has very little to do with actual real mental illnesses. And so, most of the movie seems to try to deal with, I mean, I don't know, I haven't read anything about the sort of laughing Tourette's, thing, to, whether that's, to what extent that's real or not. But most of the movie seems to deal with his mental illness, like, relatively seriously and as a mental illness. But I mean, I think the fact is that the Joker's craziness is, I mean, it's a superpower almost, right? I mean, it's just like so completely, it's not a mental illness anymore. It's like, a grand fictional madness that's just an entirely different thing. And the beginning of the movie compared to the end of the movie, like, I don't know how to, I don't know what to say about the portrayal of mental illness, just because, like, obviously at the end, when he's the Joker, I mean, like, that's no longer a portrayal of mental illness in, like, any sort of realistic sense. And to some degree, like, criticizing it as one, it doesn't make sense. But then on the other hand, that they were trying to be more realistic, for most of the movie. And so maybe it does make sense. And so I'm divided on that as well.
So I think the film seems to argue that Arthur is mentally ill, but when he acts as the Joker, like when he performs violent acts, that he gains a certain mental clarity and a clearness of thought, and physically, he is kind of emancipated from, like, his crouched, kind of...
Right, yeah.
Like, when he actually kills those Wall Street guys, his reaction is kind of like he is freed from, like, his mental illness, if that makes sense. That's the way I kind of interpreted it. Like, his suffering is kind of alleviated by his kind of violent acts.
Which is definitely another, like, movie thing that, I think is often, pretty legitimately criticized, that, like, in movies it is often... someone with any kind of mental illness often sort of overcomes it in one, like, single moment of clarity. I mean, like, you have, like, a Fight Club type thing where it's just like, oh, I see, I have a multiple personality, I'll just take control. Or, like, all the different, crazy person falls in love and suddenly their whole life is magically fixed, and, various things like that, right? And that's, I think a reasonably good example of that, right? Where it's just like, I've been... sort of freed from the suffering caused by, Which is, I think that's, perfectly, that's a legitimate criticism, I think, of the way the movie portrays mental health, probably.
Yeah, and I guess pathological laughter is an actual thing. It's not something I was aware of before this film. It's obviously rare, but it can be caused... in my just reading WebMD and stuff, it can be caused by physical brain trauma. So it is a very specific, like, I think separate from Tourette's, but it is a thing that does exist.
Yeah, I think probably looking back at it overall, it was probably a mistake to try and define the Joker's specific type of mental illness, because it's never been meant to be a realistic type of thing.
Yeah, I feel like they have to, though, once they decide to make this particular film. They almost have to kind of lay in a very specific, which, reading Mindhunter, reading about serial killers and stuff, they've clearly checked a bunch of boxes with, physical abuse and kind of distant mother, and they've kind of checked a bunch of boxes that you would if you were trying to portray a person with serious, violent, serial killer type person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I mean, it all goes back to our earlier points where, in terms of trying to be a more serious movie in the real world, like it doesn't treat the material with enough depth and like gravitas. But then it also has the excuse of just saying like, no, this is, at the end of the day, it's just a comic book movie, and so it's not meant to be, realistic. So, and those two things don't mesh. So yeah, and along with that, like I don't really think that the movie tries overly to make him sympathetic or to glorify his violence. It's all pretty visceral when you see it on screen, and it's not, there's not some like crazy, it makes a specific point of not having some like crazy like score behind it to overshadow kind of like the horror of what's happening on screen. And so I think that was the right way to go about doing that, at least.
Yeah.
I think the one line that bothered me the most is, and that probably should have been taken out of the film, is like the knock knock joke at the end. It's just like, what do you get with, it's something along the lines of, what do you get when a bunch of mental health institutions like fail a person who needs help, yada yada yada. You get what you fucking deserve. Like, that line is clearly, I don't know, it's clearly his delusion, and the film overall makes the point of like, it's not making excuses for his behavior, but that line is just an odd one.
Yeah, that whole final interview is interesting. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, I think I kind of disagree with you. I mean, I don't think, I don't know. I don't feel like that they took many steps. I mean, I think that they did intend you to sympathize with I mean, like the only people, I mean, correct me if I'm misremembering, if I'm forgetting anybody. So, I mean, they had the Wall Street guys who were very clearly harassing a woman on a subway in a pretty shitty way, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And then assaulted him, right? So, like, that was definitely, we were supposed to, I think, feel maybe not good that they were killed, but, like, we were not supposed to like those guys, right? We didn't feel sorry for them. And then we had the guy who was pretty weird. I didn't quite understand the relationship. Gave him a gun and then ratted him out about it. And, like, sort of was supposed to be sort of two-faced, I think, right? Like, smiling to his face and, like, talking shit about him behind his back. And he stabs him and kills him. And then we have the Robert De Niro talk show host character, who I also do not have the impression that we were supposed to like. I certainly didn't like him. I mean, I found him to be kind of a shitty guy, I think.
Well, he's complicated, and maybe we'll talk about his character.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind having a conversation about him. I personally, at least, I didn't like him. And so, I don't know.
He kills his mother.
That's true. Sorry, I was actually, I was in the bathroom, when he got the medical records, and so I'm not 100% sure what happened there.
It's weird, but, and then,
sorry, the mother thing I forgot about.
And how do people feel about, Sophie Zazi's character and her daughter? I don't think we know for certain one way or the other whether he harms them, I guess. It would seem that he doesn't, but it also would seem like she might have then called the police. And I think he's got a couple days there where he's free, so I don't know. I mean, I don't
know. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the movie gave us any reason to think that he did. And I mean, I just sort of assume that, the people in that building probably try not to call the cops unless they have to. So I would suspect that she just, is a little more conscientious about locking her door when she's out of the apartment or when she's in the apartment.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, I guess on first viewing, I thought that he did not. And then on second viewing, I'm less certain whether he did or didn't. I mean, when trying to remember the exact timing, but I think it shows him coming back to his apartment, and again, he has no, like, defensive wounds where you would assume she would have fought like hell if he did anything. So I'm not certain, but your list of the people he kills is correct. I would argue that the third Wall Street guy, that's
definitely, it's a straight execution.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that was the guy, but that was also the guy who started harassing the woman in the first place. Right?
Well, he was drunk and he offered her a fry, I think.
I think
the first two guys are justifiable, honestly. The first two guys
self-defense
are...
self-defense shootings. Yeah.
You can't, there's no way that third guy is not...
No. I'm not saying it's justifiable. I'm just saying that the character was the characters who were killed were not sympathetic characters. And if you want somebody to be horrified by killings, then you make the people who get killed sympathetic. And I'm saying I don't think they did that. So I don't think they particularly wanted us to be horrified by his killings. I think that they, I don't know if I would say wanted us to be on his side, but at least not be completely against him either. I don't know. I mean, I think, that they were doing a couple of things that were, Me Too is a thing right now, and resentment of, the wealthy, the billionaire class, whatever you want to call it, right? The Elizabeth Warren kind of Bernie Sanders line, right? Like, both of those are relatively popular opinions and movements in the U.S. And so, I think that, the fact that those are the targets that they picked, basically, right? I don't think, I think that they deliberately made the victims unsympathetic or potentially unsympathetic.
Then there's the psychiatrist at the end, but that's almost a completely different character. He's a different character at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I was sort of discounting that as being that's after the turn completely.
Correct. Yeah. What about you, Matt? Any thoughts on what happened to Zazie Beetz and her daughter, or just the nature of Joker's crimes, or it's more accurate to say Arthur's crimes?
Yeah, something of what I think about what you guys just talked about. Yeah, I don't think he killed Zazie Beetz' character or her daughter. That was my interpretation of it. And yeah, I agree that it's a mistake of the film where they kind of do the horror trope mentality where a lot of the kills you see in horror movies are meant to be people who are dicks, assholes, whatever. And that the film should have shown him killing more what we deem as innocent people to mark kind of to help make his character less sympathetic.
And I mean, I guess that's sort of what I'm saying. I mean, I guess it, I'm not sure what we mean by should, but that's what I'm saying is maybe I'm wrong. I don't think they wanted him to be unsympathetic.
Right, yeah, I guess perhaps the better way to word it is that they could have done a better job at not kind of glorifying his character.
I think on some level they want to have it both ways. Maybe they want to glorify and make him sympathetic, and they also. So yeah. I think that's probably why maybe the Sophie character is kind of left somewhat ambiguous. So let's talk about, I guess, Robert De Niro as Murray Franklin. Kind of he's almost the second lead, I would say, in the movie. I don't know if that's true or not, but what do we want to talk about with his character and performance? Because I have some things to say, but I'm curious what you guys think.
I don't know if I have enough. I'm interested to bounce off what you think. I mean, I said that I didn't like him and I didn't find him sympathetic. Yeah. I don't know. I guess everything about him, and I mean, it's not like we see anything internal from him, right? Everything we see of him is external. It's him performing.
Yeah, so he's almost never the same character when he's on screen, because the first time we see him, he's almost just a projection of Arthur's fantasy for kind of a father figure, almost weirdly. Mm-hmm. And then we see him kind of performing again, which I think one of the things we know now that comedians, talk show hosts are very often different people in real life than their projected persona on television. So we see him performing, and then we see him with Marc Maron kind of backstage, I think is probably the closest to his real, maybe, character. And then in this final scene where it's that interview, again, he seems to be performing again for the cameras when he's kind of challenging Arthur, the Joker. So I think those are the four scenes I kind of remember. He's almost a different person because he's performing in some of them. He's Arthur's projection in one of them. So De Niro's kind of, I don't know how well he does it or not, but my perception is that there's kind of four somewhat conflicting characters that he's playing in his scenes. And I don't know. That's kind of my take with it. And I don't know how great a job De Niro does, but maybe I'm just projecting that onto the performance. I don't know what your guys' thoughts on that or anything else with Marty Frank.
Right. I mean, his character probably suffers the most from, the unreliable narrator aspect of it. And that, the scenes he's asked to play, he's, asked to do something different in each scene that's not really meant to gel as one distinct character. And so, it's, to me, I don't really have any criticisms with the performance. He did as best he could with what he had, I feel. It's just that by nature we just don't really get that good of a feel for who that character really is. Although, I don't think he's the nicest person in the world.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And like I said, I was not happy with De Niro's performance, I guess, but when I thought about it more, I kind of came up in my head that he's kind of playing the character, a different character almost in each scene. So some of that disconnect is probably intentional, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't particularly I didn't think of it as being inconsistent in a bad way. I think that you're right. That in every scene he was sort of doing something different, and he is most of the time, except for just those couple of minutes. Even the dressing room scene, right? Those 2 minutes where it's he's sort of himself. He's still not really, right? Because he's, basically, I can't think of the word. Grooming seems slightly wrong, but he's sort of can't think of a good word. Coddling, grooming, soft soaping this guy so that he won't do anything, so that he'll do what he wants him to do on the stage, right?
I think so, yeah.
So he's definitely, and so it also makes me, I think people could argue that his questioning of Arthur right before he gets killed is the movie sort of calling Arthur on his bullshit.
Kind of chorus, kind of
right, yeah, but I sort of disagree because, I think you could argue that, but I brought it up just to dismiss it.
Okay.
I think that he's self-serving, right? Because he's doing a performance on his show, and he is, to me, all that was is he's trying to look good and cool and tough while dealing with this maniac who claims to have murdered 3 people. Right, and maybe did murder 3 people. And so, I thought of it as him, kind of puffing himself up and trying to look cool, and I didn't see it as him, taking, an actual stand and saying, hey, what you're doing is wrong, and what you're saying, these are excuses. And I think a lot of people might read it that way, but it's not the way that it came across to me, anyway.
Yeah, I think both things are true, right? That the character is performing. Again, like I said, I think the closest we see to him as the real person is where he's kind of setting Arthur up, where he's showed this clip.
Yeah.
He's got him and he's kind of setting it up for good TV. But again, I think he is performing in that final scene but it's still also, I think, things that Todd Phillips wants to put in there as having been said during the course of the film, so that the film is aware of some of these things that
that's
Todd
true.
is.
Yes,
So,
that's absolutely, that's a fair point. Yeah, but he definitely, you want to have some characters say that, just so you don't have everybody in the world writing the article like, well,
Yeah, and that's
obviously they all wrote that article.
right. Yeah, and that's
something else I do want to talk about is that. But go ahead, Matt.
oh god. I mean, yeah, like that's kind of been the root of some of the points I've been making, where I don't want to give credence to those stupid articles and the whole debate we have, that is ever ongoing, whether it be movies, video games, whatever, and I don't even want to get into that because I hate it all. It's dumb and I don't give credence to it.
I agree, but I think we almost have to talk about it at some point.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
I'll sit
your
that part of the
position, at
conversation.
least.
Yeah, I'll sit that part of the conversation out. So I guess, my thoughts on I mean, I do really like that. That interview scene is one of my favorite scenes, and the film, and yeah, I think it's both where Robert De Niro's character is certainly horrified by what the person is what the Joker is claiming to have done, but he immediately tries to basically make ratings out of it, and that's kind of, I mean, it's the whole reason he brings him on the TV show in the first place, is because he got a good response and good ratings from the Clippy show, and so he wants to milk that particular, drain that particular well. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it, where he's kind of playing both things on it, where arguing against it, but also doing this for television ratings.
Okay, that might be a good place to ask. Do people have favorite scenes or lines, or, I mean, again, I think there's mostly one performance, but favorite scenes, lines, performances, or anything that they want to kind of highlight before we move on to something else?
So I mean, for me, it's that scene, it's the dancing on the stairs, and kind of that little montage of kind of, how he finally becomes like confident and stands up straight and just
kind of embraces that Joker.
Yeah, the Joker persona, and I just thought that was such a spot on piece of acting of Joaquin Phoenix, which is why, he's, probably he might be the only or one of the very few people, who actually could portray the Joker properly in our time. And something like overall, like an overall choice I really like about the film is that he's just kind of, going through his life, and all this stuff is happening to him, and he's trying to figure things out, and that this whole like Joker movement is kind of just happening around him.
Yeah.
And like latching on to him, without, just naturally, without him doing anything, without him specifically trying to manipulate it or anything. It's just kind of like using him and imprinting their grievances onto him as like a leader figure. And I really enjoyed that he didn't have any express control over, the riots that were happening. He's just kind of embracing the chaos of it all. And I thought that was very true to the character, and a very good choice that the film did.
Yeah, he's just tapping into this undercurrent inadvertently. It's nothing that he specifically himself tried to happen or tried to make happen. It's just, but he sees in that legitimization or something that I think he's wanted to be like an important person his whole life, and then this movement rises up.
Yeah.
And he sees himself then as an important person, as this kind of making his fantasy world reality.
Yeah, and I think that's where the line of the tragedy in my life is actually a comedy is very poignant and works very well.
What about you, Michael? Any favorite scenes or things?
Yeah, I mean, I
you weren't in the bathroom for?
Similar stuff. I think like sort of like anything where it's sort of like the anything that's like Arthur becoming the Joker, I don't like. I wanted the Joker stuff, right? That you talked about, Matt, the dancing down the stairs. I liked that a lot. Did anybody else think so? After he shoots the Robert De Niro character, sorry, I don't know anyone's name. Murray, sure, whatever. He tosses the gun on the desk, and he does like a little bit of like business, like that reminded me of Heath Ledger. Like the kind of like the weird, like sort of almost jerky Joker movements. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. He kind of dances towards the camera.
Yeah, it's just sort of like, like not like it looked like sort of like stilted in a weird. I enjoyed that. I thought that looked. To me, it looked like an homage to Ledger's sort of Joker. I enjoyed that. Yeah, a lot of it. Just everything Joaquin Phoenix did was really good. Like all of his, everything that he did, like all of his stuff. His laughter was unpleasant. I didn't like watching it, but it was well done. But just like everything, him sitting in his therapy sessions, smoking. I really enjoy people who are actors who have like a lot of business with their cigarette, just like a lot of, movements. I always find that fascinating to watch.
So I think my very favorite scene was the one where Randall and Gary come to his house, or his apartment rather. And he's kind of painting his face white and getting ready to go on the show that night. And the music, we kind of get the music in his head, and it's full and it's clear and it's loud. And then when they knock on the door, it cuts to that music on the radio, and it's very tinny and staticky. We kind of get that kind of elevated sense of what's going on in Arthur's mind. And then just he grabs the scissors, and he's kind of like, we see in his response to Randall, he kind of is what we saw earlier when he was playing around with the gun, where he's kind of rehearsed his kind of cool, almost De Niro, hunter kind of patter, and he kind of is, and then he just stabs Randall, or he slashes him in the throat and stabs him in the eye. And then that whole scene where we see kind of tossing away, I think, of Arthur, and he's almost gone, I think, from that point on in the rest of the movie. I liked the tension with poor Gary, and he can't unhook the lock chain, and it's just, and even then, I think, Arthur goes boo at him, when he's kind of walking.
Right.
It's really, as you said, the tone of the movie is really uncomfortable and that's for 2 hours, maybe not the most fun experience in a cinema, but it's really the music, the score, the soundtrack, the cinematography, everything is kind of designed to not make you feel pleasant or comfortable throughout. And I think that scene, it kind of all comes together in a really effective way.
Yeah, that scene exemplifies it very well. Yeah, no, I enjoyed that, and then and I also enjoyed the scene that Michael missed in the bathroom with Brian Tyree character. I thought was very good, and he kind of slowly comes to the realization of that Arthur truly needs help, and he kind of wants to. He's just I'm just an administrative assistant, man.
Yeah, records clerk, and he's
right. Yeah,
on himself.
Try and help him. I thought that was a very good short scene and character.
I do want to talk about African American characters in the film. I think it must be. I don't know who did someone bring this up in our chat?
I think it was briefly mentioned, but yeah, I had thought about that too.
All the African American characters in the film, some way or another, are trying to be kind and helpful. It's maybe the first,
to some degree at least.
Or social worker is maybe a little bit on the fence there, but.
At least personally, she doesn't seem that great, but she did, she decided to do a job where she helps people, right? It's something, right?
But I was kind of bothered, and maybe we'll talk about. I'll let you guys comment if you have anything to say about that first, which is clearly must be a choice of the film. Though I didn't consciously notice it until someone else brought it up. But
I noticed, at least, again, I wasn't really involved with the record clerk scene, but I definitely noticed that both of his therapists which is sort of bookended, right? Because did the movie start with the therapy scene or not? No, I can't remember. Anyway, it's definitely early in the movie. We get the therapy scene, and so like I mean, it kind of bookended that way, right? And the fact that like they were both female African Americans. I don't know. I
guess the mother on the bus is kind of
is
a case where she's obviously just trying to be protective of her child, but at the same way she's not kind to her.
That's true.
But I still think there's something there to that.
It seems like, I don't know. I mean, I could believe that it is a case of simply reading into something that's not there, but it is at least, I would say, I mean, it is something that I bumped on, that like his two therapists were both.
I mean, it's technically possible, but I don't.
Right, yeah, it's not, it's not
like
really
even that it's like
it's
worth
super unlikely.
speculation.
I don't know what to say about it.
Okay.
Really.
It feels unfair of trying to bring out a negative criticism of something that may not be there. Not that I'm everything that Todd Phillips has said on the internet is dumb, and you shouldn't read it or pay attention to it. But I don't think that there's enough evidence here to warrant a really deep look at this possibility.
Fair enough. One thing that bothered me, and maybe we'll talk about like things that just bugged us about the film, but was like his mother's Arkham Asylum or Arkham State Mental Institution or whatever it was paperwork contains like his adoption papers and like clippings from a newspaper's clippings. It just seems like a hospital's records would not have all that information in there. So again,
here's the convenient source of all your backstory, Arthur.
Yeah. So that bugged me. It was one of the things.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
But I mean, adding another 10-minute scene where he talks to someone that knew his mother when
sure, yeah.
I don't know if that makes any more sense, but another thing that bugged me, again, we talked about the 8-shot revolver, which is a thing, but is kind of off-putting in this scene where he kills the Wall Street guys. I guess referring to those Wall Street guys, if this is not in New York City but is in Gotham, is again strange, but the film does refer to them as Wall Street guys at one point, at least.
Is there I mean, I'm not a comic book person. Is there a Wall Street in Gotham?
I mean, there's a financial district in Gotham.
It doesn't have
I'm sure it has multiple references to it, and whether there's a street specifically, I don't recall offhand. I could dig out an atlas of the DC universe or something, but so that bugged me. And then my final thing was just the ambulances in the film seemed not period to 1981 to me, to my recollection of what ambulances looked like in 1981. And that's a very minor criticism, and I'm sure someone on the film made sure that they were accurate, but they seemed much more modern than if you I looked this up just because it stuck in my head, but if you've ever seen Cannonball Run, which is a film that came out in 1981, there's an ambulance in there, and it's just a van. I mean, they were basically vans, like slightly bigger vans at the time. But again, those are the few things like were just niggling anachronisms, or just struck me in the case of his file or his mother's file. Is just kind of being removing me from the film for a minute or so.
I mean, I think those were all great nitpicks. I wish that I had some. I like all of those, and now I'm mad too. But I don't think I really have anything. I perhaps was not paying as close attention. I wish I had been.
Yeah, in a lot of action films, I almost always have nitpicks of bullet counts and all that. And yeah, that's one of those weird things where, I feel like most people would say who cares?
Yeah.
And yet I know if I were to make a movie, I would make such a point of when I was shooting to like count stuff and like put in reloads at the proper time. And so therefore when I go see a movie that doesn't do that, I just don't understand why, because it just seems like such a simple thing to me. With the possible exception of obviously, editing can change a lot of that where, when you're actually shooting it on the day, you do take that into account, but then if it's edited in a different way, it can kind of mess up your direction of it. So I can understand that possibility, but yeah, it's just one of those things where it seems like such a simple thing to do, and yet no movie really does to me. But whatever.
Except for Clue. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the fact that like the revolver. I mean, and I didn't look closely at the revolver because I didn't look closely at anything because I wasn't paying close enough attention. But the fact that there is at least like a plausible or a possible, like those guns do exist. What was weird to me with that was I just felt like I felt like it wasn't even so much that I was counting the shots. It was just like it just felt like too many. It was just like, why is this still happening?
Yeah.
In a way that that actually like kind of pulled me out a little bit, where I was like, I wasn't counting, but that seems like too many shots, and like he didn't need that many shots, right? Like it's not like they were just like, these are unnecessary. I don't know why this keeps happening.
Yeah, I seeing it the first time, I thought he was going to get up to that injured third banker guy and
then
just go click. But
and run out.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And then on the second time, I did count. But that's a nitpick, and again, I'm sure Todd Phillips can tell you that those guns did exist in 1981, so I'm sure it's possible.
Sure, yeah.
But just give them an automatic if you're going to have them fire 8 times. It just seems.
Right, yeah. Don't make right, that's the main thing. It's just like, choose a gun that you can't immediately tell how many bullets are in it. Like, I mean, that's the easy way to get around a lot of this is, most magazines, can have a wide variety of number of shots. And so that, like, as long as you don't show us what they are, you can kind of bend the truth a little bit. But when you clearly make it a revolver like that, pay attention. I do have, kind of a more, serious criticism of probably like my least favorite thing of the film was Bruce Wayne. Was Thomas Wayne.
Okay.
And just how that.
It's like, what did that kid do to you, man?
Right.
Well, Bruce, I don't like it being tied into Bruce's origin story, but let's talk about Thomas Wayne first.
Yeah, it's just I just don't like the portrayal of Thomas Wayne and just making him a huge dick. It seemed unnecessary, and it's one of those things where I have a decent amount of knowledge of comic book lore, but I don't like read. It's mostly from like search, just researching Wikipedia or whatever. I've never been a big comic book reader, but overall, like what I know of Thomas Wayne and like my general interpretation of him, where I can understand because he was killed early that obviously he's how we perceive him is going to be manipulated by that, where they're
sure.
going to,
I mean, we get hold him Bruce's perspective and somewhat through Alfred's perspective. So those are unreliable perspectives to begin with, who kind of canonize Thomas and Martha. But I think what you're saying is very true and accurate to the comics for the most part. That he's portrayed almost never as a dick, it has happened, but almost never.
Yeah, like you could certainly, you could certainly retcon things if you wanted to. And I'm sure, as a wealthy person, he probably had blind spots to exactly, how best to help the disenfranchised. But yeah, my interpretation is that he always felt like a person who was genuinely trying to help people, and in this, it just seemed dismissive, and it was also, in part the choice of the actor that played him, where that dude always plays a dick. Like,
well, originally it was supposed to be Alec Baldwin, correct? Was originally cast.
Oh, really?
As Thomas Wayne, and again, this was the point where I was like, God, I don't want this movie to exist, but it seemed clear that they were going to make him kind of a Trumpian villain.
Yeah.
He doesn't. The Brett Cullen performance, as written and performed, doesn't quite go there. I mean, he actually triggers a populist rebellion against him instead of kind of feeding into. So it's. But I agree. There's that line where he's kind of says people that have made something of themselves or something. Whereas the Wayne family is traditionally old money, and Thomas Wayne inherited his money and is generally viewed as a philanthropist and a doctor and a good or great person. And it's kind of off-putting here where again, if you're going to do a gritty reboot or whatever, to make him kind of with problems or issues is fine, but I too was not happy.
Yeah, I mean,
I was never happy when, and maybe we'll talk about whether Bruce and Arthur are half brothers, but when it started going in that direction, I was like, definitely not feeling
for sure.
that.
I refuse to believe that is the case, because that is an awful idea. I mean, and we'll get into it later about, possible sequels or whatever, and I don't really, I was already, you already did a good job by getting me to see this movie in the first place. I wouldn't try and push your luck with making another one. But yeah, I mean, right. There's no way that they should be related or half brothers in any sort. Like, that is a terrible, terrible idea of a retcon.
Yeah, that seems like really bad writing to me, if that's where it went to me.
Yeah. So overall just didn't like Thomas Wayne kind of being a major catalyst for this kind of riot rebellion type thing.
What about you, Michael? Any thoughts on Thomas Wayne or that part of the film?
So I didn't really, none of that stuff bothered me particularly. Like, I'm not a comic book person much at all. And so, like, I didn't feel any sort of, like, they're fucking up Thomas Wayne, he's a good guy. And then also, like, even to the extent that, like, I've learned after the fact that Thomas Wayne is generally perceived as being a good guy in most of the comic books. I'm sort of like, well, I mean, it's the Joker's perspective, and I understand that. I mean, some of the stuff was, actually, like the quotes from the or the interviews where he's actually speaking. I mean, like, you have to say, like, well, I suppose that actually factually happened, but it's still kind of like the whole thing is kind of like Joker's perspective of Thomas Wayne, and so it bothers me less, I think, than it might otherwise. Just because it's sort of like, I mean, that's. Since I don't know the comics particularly, it doesn't bother me from, and just generally, yeah. I guess I don't care. I don't care about Thomas Wayne.
You're
I thought
free
it was fine.
from all that baggage of continuity and stuff.
I'm sure it would irritate me. It would irritate me a lot if I was a comic book person, but since I'm not, I don't particularly care, I guess.
I mean, Batman's been around so long, and so many different people have written so many different things and stuff. So I shouldn't. I think it's more whether you, whatever you like or don't like about this performance is fine. I think, but you shouldn't.
I think that obviously they decided relatively early to go with sort of like a populist, anti-rich, kind of uprising or whatever the right word would be, protest, whatever, resistance.
There's an actual resist sign, right? One of them.
Yeah, right, exactly. Which is a little whatever, but so I think if you're going to do that, and you have a movie that is very loosely tied in to Batman already, I can understand why they would be sort of scrambling for, like, God, we got to get something. What are we going to do? Like, we have to do something to make it clear that this is set. I mean, like, how many times can we say Gotham City before it's like, No, it's
Yeah.
not New York. I want that to be very clear to everyone. This is Batman, right? I mean, like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and that
So
was
I
very
think, like,
much.
Yeah, making
Oh.
Thomas Wayne sort of like a villain, I think in some ways is a decision that makes a lot of sense because you want to try to rope it into that mythology.
Yeah, for the last 30 minutes, as much as I enjoyed it, they definitely just did their best of just throwing as much Batman at the wall,
Yeah.
to connect it to possible future films.
Yeah, I did not expect that going. I think we joked during the Batman versus Superman that apparently directors cannot help themselves from wanting to film the alley scene where Thomas and Martha Wayne or Martha.
I know, man.
Every movie
It's
where you just don't think it has any place in it. And
No, they can't.
It
has to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was about to say, like, even Spider-Man has finally gotten away from killing Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
And the Spider-Verse thing was like, don't you dare finish that sentence. Don't you say that line. Why can't Batman do the same?
Yeah. Hopefully, we're getting a new Batman movie. Hopefully. It's not in there, but I have no faith that it won't.
I know, it better not be at this point, but I do. When we're done here, I do want to talk about that as I am excited for future Batman stuff, and I hope they do a good job.
Okay, we touched on like the movie moral panics, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think this film, I'll just say personally, I think this film was unfairly kind of built up in a way where I got the impression the media almost was begging for someone to go into a theater and shoot it up. It just was.
Yeah,
to
man.
Me,
like
they just so desperately wanted something to happen. It was really
I find it honestly
disgusting.
And I'm sitting at home, and like I legitimately, like, all I could think about, like, kind of going into this opening weekend was just like, please don't let it happen. Like, please, like, I was legitimately worried, that something like what happened with The Dark Knight was gonna happen. And I was, like, pretty much begging, like, for God's sakes, don't let it happen. And so, so I think the fear of something like that happening is legitimate and very real, but it's just like one of those things, like, for God's sake, like, don't say it out loud, man. Like, don't bring it up.
Don't manifest it.
Exactly.
Have something that you can report on because you've kind of set it up beforehand. I don't know what's responsible for the media there, but I don't believe that films or video games or whatever causes violence.
Yeah.
And some people have an agenda there, I think, that they want to. But whatever. But I just did want to bring it up before, so we don't get any criticism, so we didn't at least address it.
Right, yeah. That's kind of my thing. Like, I acknowledge it. I just don't think it's worth having a discourse about it, really.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish, I mean, I know this isn't directly related to, like, the, making of an incel sort of stuff.
Oh, that's good. I want to go there next, so.
Okay. But it is, I mean, it's stuff where it's like, I would be interested in hearing the opinion of someone who disagreed. But, yeah, I'm with y'all. I don't understand. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not, a media critic or something. I don't know that my opinion should necessarily be worth much, but I don't understand. I mean, to me, it seems ridiculous and irresponsible. I mean, like, if anything had happened, I think that it would be, at best, a 90-10, like, the fault of the media, 90% the fault of the media, 10% the fault of the film, or something. I mean, obviously, 100% the fault of the shooter.
Exactly.
Sorry,
exactly,
but in terms of, like, outside influences or whatever, like, the media harping on it, and just, I mean, that's what was, whatever. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't understand that media narrative, and I think that it was, at best, stupid, and at worst, very irresponsible.
Yeah, I think perhaps a better way to articulate like my thoughts on the matter is that I feel like and I worry that when people bring up these types of arguments and criticism, they're doing so with a personal or alternate agenda, and I just don't feel like they're making the positive arguments in good faith. And so that's why I just don't think they're worth engaging when they have an ulterior motive behind the criticism they're making.
I tend to agree. I guess unless anyone else has more to say, I think we kind of similar points of view on that. And it's maybe unfortunate we don't have someone on that could take a different position, but we don't. So
yeah.
Okay, do we want to talk about this sympathy for an incel kind of idea? And again, as we kind of discussed it a little bit in our chat beforehand, I'm not really qualified because I don't really understand the term, and I think it's kind of loaded. But if anyone wants to put out the position of that this movie is trying to prop up sympathy, I don't even know if I'm good on framing their argument. So if anyone
I mean, I don't know either. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't really understand the argument. I mean, I think that the defining, or at least to the extent that there's a single defining characteristic of someone who identifies as an incel, I'll say that. I think that it's it's probably misogyny, right? And I didn't get that from Arthur particularly. Like, I don't think that. I mean, like a misanthrope for sure. I mean, he hated the world. He hated everyone. By the end certainly, but like it didn't seem to me that at any point he had particular problems with women. I mean,
clearly got an unhealthy kind of fantasy life.
Sure, I meant
his notebook and stuff, where he's got
his notebook was definitely something. Like, I wish that if I had been watching it on,
could freeze frame stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Could pause and look at it. I wanted to, but it's like every time the notebook popped up, my inclination was to just start reading at the top left corner. And then I was like, oh shit, I better look at whatever they're focusing on so I don't miss a plot point or something.
Yeah.
And so see disembodied torsos of female torsos and stuff, which again, kind of consistent with a serial killer kind of.
Sure. Except that there was kind of there was nothing else in that thing, right? Where it's just that was the only thing. It was like somebody in the prop department who didn't get the whole script made the journal. And it was just what is all this stuff? Because other than that, he didn't seem to have any sort of particular sex obsession, right? I mean, he didn't even his fantasies. Maybe I'm misremembering, but was there anything in his fantasies beyond kissing? I don't recall.
No, it's his fantasies. It's mostly that she's a supportive.
Right, yeah, a
loving companion.
Yeah.
He's also clearly sexually attracted to, but
sure, of course.
But it's not like he has violence fantasies that we see towards her
or anyone, right? I mean, we don't, we don't get much of a, other than the journal, I don't have anything particular that says that he's, particularly interested or certainly unhealthily obsessed with sex. So,
Matt, did you have something to say there?
No, it's not really. I don't really have good, similar to you guys. I don't have good knowledge about it to try and guess exactly what the argument is, and my general way of seeing stuff about it is I just don't feel like anytime the word incel gets injected into an argument or debate, I've yet to see anything worthwhile discussing follow. It's just there's none of this is worth talking about.
I do tend to, I guess I wouldn't quite go that far, but I do tend to think that it is a pretty fringy internet thing that gets blown up when like the media wants to talk about whatever. Right? In the same way that like violent video games get like stuff just gets like blamed on them without like, and I mean, so I know that there was like the guy who shot some people in Toronto, he was, I guess a member of that community and stuff like that. And so I'm not saying that, I mean, in no way defending the community. The community is garbage and their ideas are, I mean, like I've been on their like Reddit pages a couple of times just to try to like see what's going on. And I mean, like their ideas are like laughably ridiculous. And I mean, they're obviously, just incredibly stupid and the people that originated the ideas are disgusting and gross. I feel, bad, I think, for, people who are sad and lonely and stumble onto those pages and like wind up getting something out of them because,
Yeah, I guess I thought I had kind of avoided reviews and reading too much before I saw it myself, and I thought when I had seen some sympathy for an incel kind of comments and reviews and stuff that this movie was going to be, like you said, kind of maybe like a sad, lonely guy's radicalization into being a misogynist or something, and I don't think that's really exists in the film. Maybe that's just my perception of what I thought they were going to be arguing for, but that's not my experience with this film, that's what it is, and I think there is, like,
I mean, the limited
incel is kind of like there are sad, lonely people, and then there are violent misogynists, and I don't think those two groups, there might be overlap, but I don't think you should be kind of putting a bunch of negative shit on a sad, lonely person, I guess, would be my point of view.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that, like, that Reddit communities like the Red Pill and stuff like that, I mean, I think that their goal is to take sad, lonely people and turn them into angry misogynists. And I mean...
I just have no experience with it, so it's all...
So, I mean, I'm saying that that's definitely a thing that exists, on Reddit and on the internet generally. And so, like, I don't want in any way to come across as, like, me saying that, like, oh, no, incels are nice and unfortunate and never do anything bad. I mean, like, they are definitely plenty of very toxic, people online who would identify as incels. I'm just saying that, like, I don't, to me, like, what, how those people are spawned and the kinds of things that they are obsessed with, they don't seem at all like the Arthur character. Right, I mean, like, obviously, he's pre-internet, so he's certainly not, like, radicalized online in that way. He doesn't, again, seem to have any sort of, like, particular antipathy for women. He doesn't think that they're, like, all women are sluts, or, that doesn't seem to be his thing at all. Like, I missed exactly why Arthur killed his mother. I came in while he was killing her, and I wasn't sure what happened. But like, I assume that was something to do with the fact that she had allowed him to be abused or something like that. Is that right?
I don't know why. I think he ends up killing Maury and his mother, like his mother and father figures, but I think it's just his emancipation from being strained by society and being Arthur and his just kind of embracing his chaotic kind of Joker persona, but I don't know why he kills his mother exactly. I guess but certainly,
I suppose
feels like
there's an
she's
argument.
Mistreated and lied and abused him, I guess. But
I suppose there's an argument there. Like, a lot of serial killers who are obviously, like rapist, murderer, serial killer people who are, obviously misogynistic and commit horrible violence against women, they seem like they kill their moms a lot or have, real problems with their mothers. So, like,
uncommon,
yeah. So, you would know more than me. I watch a few movies, that's about it. But, I guess that could be an argument, like, well, he did kill his mother. So it's like, okay, that's something. But I do think that, I don't know, I don't feel like that there's enough evidence pointing to any sort of, like, real misogyny on Arthur's part. I don't feel like he demonstrates in the film that he hates women, generally speaking, or that he even thinks that women are bad or corrupting or anything like that.
My interpretation of why he killed his mother was because, she is lying to him about adoption and all that, and there was a part where basically, she stood by and let either like his father or stepfather or something like abused him, and social services like wasn't notified in time, and so that was the reason. My interpretation of why he killed her.
That was sort of what I thought too, but yeah, I mean, I guess with any mother-son relationship, there's probably there's a lot happening there or whatever. But
yeah.
I guess do we want to just talk about Penny and potentially whether we kind of talked around it, and I think we're come down on that Penny and Thomas did not have an affair. Likely, is that?
Yeah, that's my interpretation of it.
I guess so. I mean, that's
all in her head.
Yeah,
there's the one picture that has like "I love your smile" or something TW that I think he gets from. Does he get that from the incredible Arkham dossier or where that comes from? But yeah, it seems to me she is delusional. Was at the time. I mean, when he brings it up to Alfred, when Arthur brings it up to Alfred, he doesn't like hesitate. Like, what's the backstory I'm supposed to be telling? What's the lie? He's immediately aware of her and kind of like yeah. So I come down on that was delusional on her part. I did find it interesting that Arthur then imagines a scene where she's being interviewed and he is present in that scene. That was kind of an interesting scene for me. That Arthur kind of constructs that in his fantasy world. Yeah.
I know, it was an unusual,
So it's hard to tell what really happened, if any of that.
Right.
I thought he was reading from the transcript.
Yeah, he might have been actually reading from her interview transcript, and
it was transcripts of her time at Arkham. Yeah, exactly.
Earlier on, you were speaking about how like the uprising's tied, and I thought it was something like a negative. I thought it was sort of recognition politics, which has driven various things and highlighting problems with who you choose as your symbol for your movement. And by picking the Joker and a more sort of just chaotic destruction force, you ended up with a city which was pretty much on fire by the end of the film.
What did you think of that choice? Did you think that was an unfair, unrealistic choice, or?
I thought it was a good choice. Like, lots of clever stuff throughout about the whole master slave dichotomy and the recognition of how each person gets their identity from others, like having the rich people sitting in a scene laughing at Charlie Chaplin's famous anti sort of like Labour protest film, and they're just like laughing, completely oblivious to it. The whole themes of recognition and the Joker's personality I also thought were handled quite well. Like how he's always seeming to seek for recognition no matter how sort of terrible those actions are to get that recognition. I think that recognition within performance sort of arts is a quite pleasant force, although in reality it tends to cause more suicide rather than violent bloodbaths. But it is still a bad sort of structure to have where like you have the people who want the most attention going into the places where they'll find negative behaviour directed at them when they are the ones most in need of positive behaviour directed at them. So it creates these negative feedbacks which end in quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, I'm glad you put that in. That's interesting perspective. I guess suicide, maybe I'll just mention the refrigerator scene here and see if anyone has any thoughts on whether that's important or what the meaning of that scene was where Arthur kind of cleans out his refrigerator and then climbs inside.
I like your interpretation.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people interpret it as like kind of a cocoon where he emerges then as the Joker. It's a little more complicated than that, I think. But I put in the chat again that maybe he's actually does kill himself there. There's a lot of kind of foreshadowing throughout the film that Arthur's going to commit suicide, and he ultimately obviously does not. Or Arthur does not. Whether the Joker comes out of his death, I don't know. But just curious what your thoughts on that refrigerator scene were, if any.
I don't know, I thought it was a comedy element, but I was just being stupid. I took the Joker as sort of face values, in which when he said it's not a tragedy, it's a comedy, they started to try and pick up comedic elements. I thought I found a few, but I may have just been making a mountain out of a molehill. I thought, when he said, we just all need to be more civil, then immediately shoots a guy. I thought that was, changed the tone a bit, and that's a comedic scene. And him just, randomly going back to the alleyway and kicking the sign.
Yeah, there are some weird, as you say, it's the tenor or, atmosphere of the film is very dark. There are some weirdly jokes in there, like when his mother says to him, "Don't comedians have to be funny?" I mean, that's...
Yeah.
That's kind of funny, but it's also kind of an incredibly hurtful thing that she says to him there. But I'm trying to think if there are some other moments that have kind of a bit of humor in them.
Well, lots of them are done in specifically uncomfortable ways. I like the comedy scene, just the straight up anti-Semitic joke that's getting played to him. Then, they diffuse, murders with, weird bits of comedy.
Yeah, and then the final scene where he's being chased through the hallways is really discordant from much of the rest of the film's tone.
Yeah.
I did think it was trying to make a point of, or tragedies and comedies, all that different. Is it just your point of view? But I think it's quite a hard case to make.
Let's talk about whether there's going to be a sequel to this movie or what its effect on future DC properties, including Matt Reeves. It's not really
Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, because it's Robert Pattinson. So, similar to Batfleck. My overall thoughts are, I don't want a sequel to this film, but I would be fine seeing Joaquin Phoenix play the Joker, kind of within the upcoming Batman universe world, whatever.
I think that would be very difficult, right? I think if this movie took place in 1981, Arthur's 30 years old in 1981.
Yeah, we would have to...
I haven't really heard what the setting is for the Matt Reeves Batman. I'm assuming it's present day, but maybe that's not a correct assumption. But
yeah, we would have to kind of ignore at least the time period or whatever of this film, all you're doing is really just taking this character and then plucking this character out of this movie and then putting him into a different universe. He did a good enough job at it where I would be fine seeing him show up, but I don't really want kind of a sequel to this film specifically.
Yeah, I guess I don't want a sequel to this film. Warner Brothers kind of painted themselves in a bit of corner because this is, I think it can be a commercial success as well as very likely at least garner nominations critically successful. So I don't know that it makes any sense and I don't think I want to see another movie, but then again, I did not want to see this movie when it was first announced, so maybe they could surprise me with a sequel. I don't think it makes any sense in any other universes, so I prefer that they kept this to itself. I would be interested in maybe a Luther movie or something like that, where they did another kind of deep, kind of realistic take on another villain like Lex Luthor or someone like that, which might offer some insights and kind of cultural criticisms that could be possible with that. But and again, I say I don't want to see a sequel to this movie, but then I didn't want to see this movie to begin with, and I ended up enjoying it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What
I just feel like probabilities being what they are.
Yeah,
it's
a business.
I just don't think they could pull it off again.
Be very surprised if they could.
Yeah, I will say on the Lex Luthor thing, I now that all of kind of the CW stuff is starting up again and being advertised, I did kind of skim through the back half of Supergirl.
I have not yet.
From last season, where John Cryer plays Lex Luthor, and surprisingly does a very good job at it. I really enjoyed his portrayal as Lex Luthor. So just a recommendation.
Check that out. Yeah. I did not care for the first half of the Supergirl season with and it had kind of like a
the liberty,
anti-immigrant, people.
I agree with you.
It was not an enjoyable show for me to watch, but I keep meaning to go back now that it's kind of streaming to check out the second half, but I have not yet.
Yeah, I think the second half is much better. Even though he's still around as part of the story, but it's all Lex's master plan, and there's a little bit of Red Daughter and taking the Red Sun storyline in there too, but really the focus is just on Lex Luthor, and I thought they did a really good job with it. Yeah, there are possibilities for other villain standalone films. I'm hoping that Birds of Prey is good.
I hope so. I have my doubts, but I hope so.
Yeah, no, I agree. Perhaps comparing it to this film, where I was very much against this film at the start, and then the trailers turned me around. The trailer they released for this, Birds of Prey wasn't as exciting, but I'm still overall excited for the property in general and the people they have cast, and so I'm not I'm withholding judgment on this one yet.
Yeah, I'm excited for Ewan McGregor's Black Mask.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
And Zaz and Harley Quinn.
And Mary Elizabeth Winstead is playing Huntress. They have Cassandra Cain in there as well.
She seems to be completely different, but I'm interested to see their take on her. She is my favorite Batgirl.
Really?
Really, truly, to me, she is Batgirl, and
I just want
Barbara is Oracle, but
yeah, I honestly just want any Batgirl on screen at this point, man.
Alicia Silverstone didn't do it.
Yeah, sure. It's nothing against her. It's just that film. We just need some sort of Batgirl, and we need a good Poison Ivy. That's another one I want to see. We need a good Mr. Freeze. There's. This is the kind of the main reason
I'd love to see a gritty, realistic Mr. Freeze.
Yeah.
Scientist was at his wit's end. Ben, his mortgage from Bear Stearns, got the vote, and now he has to freeze people to pay off his loan.
Yeah, no,
So they've cast Rihanna, right, as Poison Ivy for the Matt Reeves Batman, which is pretty interesting.
Really?
Yes, I think I saw. Am I making that?
There's no. No, that's a terrible choice. Wait, what? All right, hold on a second.
Maybe this is a fever dream. I don't know. I'm trying to Google it now. I swear I saw that on. So maybe it's just a rumor. Maybe. Appears to be a rumor.
Okay, thank God. She's not nothing against Rihanna, but she's not an actress.
She was in Battleship.
Yeah, one of the worst performances of all time. She was all right. She was all right in Ocean's 8. But yeah, that's not her skill set. No, if I do like some random fan casting, like cast Zendaya, like or something like that.
It would be difficult.
But yeah, like overall, I'm excited for the Matt Reeves Batman. I'm just excited for Robert Pattinson in general, and going back to a younger Batman and kind of starting things over, and basically, doing what Spider-Man has been doing in the MCU, where it's, just pulling from the great rogues gallery that Batman has, and taking the more ridiculous characters and putting them like in a more real world element, and making them like menacing and terrifying, and I'm really excited to see something like that.
We could be getting that in the next Suicide Squad too. Some of the more ridiculous characters,
right? Yeah, with James Gunn doing that, it's a good that has a good potential behind it.
I'm very excited for that as well.
Yeah, and rumors we're hearing with Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon, other stuff. I think other fan casting could be like Sterling K. Brown as like Mr. Freeze, stuff like that, where just there's a bunch of like possibilities that I'm excited for, and hopefully they don't crush my dreams.
Well, I think if Joker proves anything, it's going with very, very low expectations, and be hopefully pleasantly surprised rather than going with sky high expectations.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on future possibilities with this character or DC in general?
I knew almost nothing that anyone's been talking about for the last 10 minutes. It went by in a blur.
I'm ready for the Ratcatcher standalone movie?
I don't even know what that means, Thomas. I have no idea what you're talking about.
See, when you say like red pill and like, I barely know what you're talking about. So.
From the beginning of that conversation, though, I did want to say, basically, because I agree. I wouldn't mind seeing a Joaquin Phoenix Joker in another movie, because I would like to see him do the full blown Joker and not sort of like the origin story. But yeah, I don't see how a sequel, like a proper sequel, would work with the timeline and like how old he is versus how young Batman is, and I think there's some various problems there. So yeah.
I left Jared Leto out when I was talking about cinematic portrayals of the Joker. Maybe that says more about.
Well, no, that was interesting actually, because
he's been stricken from all records.
I saw it at I guess I don't. Maybe you guys don't. I guess they probably don't have them. There's a company called Alamo Drafthouse. Do y'all know them at all?
Yeah,
aware. Yeah, but we don't have.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So I saw Joker at Alamo Drafthouse, and they have usually in front of the movie, they'll have like the little 15-minute I don't know, like in front of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they had just sort of like a little 15-minute video about like TV shows that were on in the 70s or something like that. And so they had like a little retrospective of like different actors who played the Joker. And it was it was like 15 minutes long. So it's like a decently long video, just sort of like going over various portrayals and like interesting facts. And Jack Nicholson, blah, 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 Cesar Romero, and then like at the very end, it's like also there was Jared Leto. And then that was the end of the video.
Yeah. God, the only aspect I liked of that from Suicide Squad was his henchmen dressing up in like the ridiculous stuffed animal costumes and like other stuff. And it's the only thing I liked from that. I don't even want to call it a portrayal.
Thank you all for joining me. Please join our discussion at the Podcast of Ice and Fire forums. Okay, well, thanks everyone. I really enjoyed the discussion. I hope we covered everything. I feel like I left out a point or two, but I've really enjoyed talking to you all about it.
Yeah,
I had a good time.
I also like how chaotic it was, given the subject matter.
How's everyone?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
It's good. Snow
Good.
on the ground this morning, so that's fun.
Jeez.
Yeah, I was not ready for that.
Yeah, we had a nice little cold snap, but I mean that just means it was like 45 degrees.
Yeah, 45 is nice.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with it.
Yep, still 60s and 70s here.
You're like in DC or on DC, is that correct?
Yep.
Jock was here, correct? Is Jock?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, he's,
and just always hearing temperatures in Fahrenheit when you're used to Celsius systems. Yeah, it was 45 degrees. It was all right, yeah.
It's 0 Celsius here, I think. This is the only time I can actually say what Celsius is.
Imaginary numbers.
Okay.
Well, it has to do with, like, at the States it's in, with Celsius.
I don't want to debate the metric system, but I don't know. I guess if I had learned it as a kid, it would have been that.
I think that there are better arguments for the metric system, you know, in terms, like, I mean, is Celsius even, it's not really the metric system, right? It's a different thing, yeah?
I guess.
I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with, like, you know, micro, milli, all that stuff,
I
right?
guess so, yeah.
That's, yeah. I think there's a much more solid argument for the metric system than for Celsius when it comes to measuring human environmental temperatures or whatever. I feel like the gradient is too big with Celsius.
I agree, but I'm ignorant, so I agree. It doesn't carry much weight.
I don't remember everything that the metric system is based on, but it's based off of things like oscillations in quartz crystals and stuff, so it's based on scales that are scientifically accurate, rather than just made up for whatever use.
Is that? I mean, but they do have the representative gram or whatever. I mean, that is like a physical measurement that exists in like France or something, right? I mean, it's not like it. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, but
I don't think so anymore because it was degrading slightly. So
yeah, right, it was degrading. Yeah.
So they had to switch it to stuff like isotopic bases. That would stay continuous.
Okay. I guess I am behind the times on my metric system knowledge.
Fair.
I mean, it's to be expected. Right?
The place in Paris that it is calculated from is not actually part of France. It's international territory.
And I'm also, since this is our company, I'm going to ask for ASMR role plays. Either Harley Quinn or Joker or DC or something.
Phoenician Sailor had a good Joker one that came out right before the movie did that I liked a lot. I'm not sure if you are much of a Phoenician Sailor fan.
I would watch. I mean, again, like part of my issue with some like violent or kind of edgy or role plays, I just don't find them relaxing. I might find them entertaining, but I just generally
I can see what you're saying there, sure. I don't think that there's anything, I mean, you know, it is kind of, trying to remember, it's been like a week or two since I watched it. I don't think it's particularly violent. I guess, I mean, the thing, I get a little bit tired of Phoenician Sailor sometimes because it's like, it's all just sort of like, it tends to be like, philosophical meandering, you know, and so depending on your tolerance for that, I think it's fine. It's sort of like it's like a job interview, I guess. Like he's interviewing henchmen, sort of a thing. I like Phoenician Sailor a lot, so I liked it. But
I will check it out. Is there anything you would like to record extra? I think we lost you in the middle there, Jock. Is there anything? I'll put this in, interweave this with the discussion. But is there anything you would like to say that you felt like you didn't get a chance to say?
Don't think so. I just wasn't really speaking because I don't know much about incels or anything. So.
It doesn't stop me. I just.
That's the whole point of EOK is talking about stuff you don't know anything about, I think.
Right, yeah. And our representation and diversity certainly could have been better for this cast, so.
Yeah, I wish.
I hope we did I hope we did alright.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I tried to leave it open for as long as possible.
Of course. Yeah, it is what it is.
I mean, it's definitely Thomas's fault. I mean, I think we can all agree that
I
is the
agree.
case.
I feel that. Just add that to my negative thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. My wife wants me to turn down the crock pot at 2, so I better go do that.
You're 5 minutes late.
I know.
I gotta go out to watch the Nats game here soon, so.
Cool. All right.
All right. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, talk to you later. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Well, yeah.
Bye.
You know?